Hi, this is Siofra Bradigan, and this is Siofra's Magic Alcove. So, several people have asked me to do a video for beginner witches because there's a lot of confusion out there about how to go about doing it. And so we'll see what we come up with because, well, anywho, so if you are a member of a tradition, you don't need this video because you're a traditional form of the craft has got specific rules, rituals, and things like that that they do, and ways of teaching and learning and experiencing the craft. So, I mean, I've met a couple of traditional witches here and there, and I met one up in Canada actually that asked me for help because she needed some protection. And in her tradition, she could only do a ritual on the full moon for worshiping the moon. She wasn't, she couldn't like flare, go out and do something outside of the box, but she knew I could because I'm eclectic. And being eclectic means that you don't follow a specific tradition or a specific pantheon of gods and goddesses. Even if you do or don't follow gods and goddesses, you don't have to do that either. You don't have restrictions on your practice and what you're doing, and all that stuff. So I like being eclectic, partly because I remember past lives and a lot of different traditions in those past lives that sort of come up for me, and it makes me feel a lot more comfortable and not restricted. Now, other practices, other religions, most of them have much more specific things that you do and don't do. They have their set of rules, their set of beliefs, their mythology that they use. And witchcraft doesn't fall into that particular category unless you are in a specific tradition. So, like, for example, if you are Wiccan, a member of a Wiccan coven, and you're Gardnerian or Alexandrian or any of the other types of Wiccan traditions that there are out there, you have some things that are similar between you and everyone else in your group. And then they have room for individuality, for individual abilities and stuff like that. But they have someone who's sort of overseeing the high priestess, usually, the development of the people that are in the group, and try to look at each person there and see what it is that they're weak in and what they're strong in, and try to help them come to a balance. And so there's not a book for that. That is a very individualized type of instruction, and it only works for people in person. It's not like you can take a book and you can look at it and you can figure out where you are, what you should do, and that kind of thing. That being said, um, books are a good thing because they expose you to a lot of different ideas and a lot of different belief systems and approaches and techniques and so forth. But the thing about being a witch is it's individualized. There is your particular relationship with the universe. What fits you, what works for you, what matches your particular abilities, and what feels right in your skin. And no one can determine that but you. And because of that, it's it's not a path for everyone because you're sort of in charge of your own development. Even if you're in a group, a loose group, you're still in charge of your own development. You have to make your own choices, your own decisions, decide what you're going to study, when you're going to study it, figure out whether it works for you or not, do the shadow work, the interpersonal work, try to become a more complete human being, and sort of more in charge of your environment, both your unconscious and subconscious environment and your world environment. And so witches deal with a extended reality, we could call it, because it's not just the physical reality, which is important to us, but it's also the invisible worlds behind that reality, the manifestations of the seasons, the plants, the animals, the spirit behind those, um, trying to develop that relationship with your particular relationship with the universe. And so it's all well, there's no one way of doing it. And that often makes people feel confused and rudderless. They want to have a sequence to start with and to follow. And unfortunately, there isn't one. You can find books that will take you through steps. Like when I found Starhawk's book, The Spiral Dance, I read the whole thing from cover to cover more than once. I did most of the exercises that were in there and found that they were very powerful and helpful for me. Um, I learned more about the seasons, the wheel of the year, transformation from one state to another. It deals with the different stages of your own personal development as well as the stages of life from birth to uh, the maidenhood or youth to the motherhood or fatherhood to crone and elder. And it's like each phase has got a different kind of an energy to it and a different perspective on what you're doing. I'm clearly fully now into the crone time of my life. So I have a different perspective on things because I've gone through the confusion, the wonder, which I still have plenty of that, but the excitement of learning new things, the trying to put all the pieces together, the emotional upheavals and drama from different stages of life, being in bad relationships or having been, abused in a relationship. And I can look back at that and I can remember what it was like and how confusing it can be. And so, you know, I have that perspective, but I went through it too. We all go through these different phases when we're trying to discover who we are, what our true path happens to be. And there are so many different ways to do that. So it doesn't matter where you start. That's number one. Whether you start with trying to learn to interpret your dreams, whether you start learning the tarot and trying to understand the symbolism behind the traditional tarot decks, whether you start focusing on crystals and trying to understand the energy of crystals and how they work for you and whether they help you or not, whether you can tune into them or not, whether you're working with herbs and plants, talking to the plant people, growing a garden, trying to get in touch with the earth spirits, the fairy folk that are part of the invisible consciousness of each plant that's out there. Each plant has its own kind of community of beings that you can sometimes connect with and get inspiration from, whether it's learning how to defend yourself and create boundaries, which is also important magically as well as physically, deciding what kind of relationships you want to be in, deciding whether the universe is working for you with that kind of relationship and taking steps to change that relationship. Any of these approaches will get you to the same place. So what you decide to do in the beginning isn't that important. That's the thing. It's like I know you want to get it right and you want to do it the right way and not make a mistake, but mistakes are inevitable. And mistakes are actually good because it's from our mistakes we learn the most. If everything was always going right all the time, then we wouldn't have anything to like compare it to or see a difference in or what have you. So it's okay to not be perfect. And in this as a lifestyle, um, it can be in every part of your life or it can be in just one part of your life. You can be secretive because you're hiding your stuff in your closet at home and you don't have control over your own environment yet because you're too young. Or you can be blazing out in the open and showing everybody what you do. It's like there's no one single method for doing this. And I know that's kind of disappointing because it would be nice if there was, one book that you could buy that says this is how you become a witch and how do you know when you've succeeded and you are a witch. It's like depending on your definition of what a witch is, that can vary as well. So for me, being a witch is what I've always been because I've always known I was, probably because of past lives that I've had. And it's never been a question that I had to ask, even though I did have to go through a lot of deprogramming because I was born into a household where we went to the Methodist Church all the time, which I find out later was apparently one of the fundamentalist Christian sects, which I had no idea it was until way, way later after I was all out of it. And so that's the other thing is like you have to decide what to do with the beliefs that you've come with to the craft. So if you come to the craft already programmed to believe a certain way and you're experiencing fear because you're going against your core programming from childhood and from your environment, you have choices that you have to make. You can either decide that this is not the right path for you because facing these fears, you're worried you're going to go to hell or a demon's going to come after you or some other thing that I'm not aware of, and that this isn't right for you. And that's perfectly fine because this isn't a path for everyone. Everyone has to decide for themselves how much of it they're willing to face. But if you decide you want to do it anyway, then you have to go through that deprogramming yourself, reprogramming a worldview, a different reality at your core so that everything you do is going in the same direction. That's being a conscious co-creator with the universe. That's part of that. And then, looking at yourself as who you are, not who you'd like to be. And yes, of course, all those things in the movies aren't real. I mean, the movie The Craft, the Harry Potter and all his stuff, Charmed, the TV show, and all the other shows about witches. They have some stuff sprinkled in there that can be real, but mostly it's a fantasy reality, and you want to live in the real world. So witchcraft in the real world is different. I personally did spell work for many, many years. My choice was to work on myself. I see magic as a route to that. Ritual is a method for reprogramming my inner self, my unconscious, my subconscious, and to sort of create the person I want to be. And it is a conscious decision. I'm taking control. I'm taking the decision making of who I am, what I do, what I respond to, what I don't respond to, who I deal with, what forces I deal with on my own. Like I decide this is who I am and this is what I want to do and this is who I want to be and how do I get from who I am right now to who I want to be farther down the line. I've told you some of my incredible experiences and there are many more that sort of give me the hope that this is real for me. This isn't like an idea or a fantasy. I have concrete experiences, and a lot of people when they first start don't. It's sort of, in a sense, it becomes a leap of faith in the idea of being able to take control of your environment and doing self-development. And when I say control of your environment, I mean more your inner environment than the environment around you. So let's say you can see this in the real world pretty readily, where if you're an addict, for example, and whatever your addiction is, whether it's drugs or alcohol or a behavior, and you decide you want to not be addicted to a substance, you have to go through a whole series of steps in order to get to that place. And while you're doing that, the people that are around you who are usually addicts themselves because you attract that to yourself. That's how you got into it in the first place. And it's like they try to stop you from leaving because you getting better puts them in a bad light in their own head. They want everybody to stay the same because change is challenging. And so you end up, if you succeed in getting out of an addictive situation, you end up losing the people that are around you because they don't fit anymore. They're not your people anymore because they just want to get you back to doing what they're doing because it makes them feel more comfortable. And so witchcraft is like that. It's like if you decide you're going to follow the path and the people around you think you're going to go to hell, or you're worshiping Satan, or you're evil, you have two choices. You have the choice of accepting that they're right about that, and this is something you shouldn't do because you're afraid that they might be right, or you decide that you're going to go forth anyway and see what's really going on out there and decide for yourself. And I've seen people go through some incredible interpersonal encounters with the goddess and then fall back on their Christian upbringing. Because, like Starhawk says, it's not enough to just deny a belief system that you've grown up with. You have to actively replace it with something else. And that was my first work that I did, was figuring out how to replace that set of beliefs that I absorbed as a kid and make it something else, something I could grow in and grow with and explore, and it explained all of the strange things that happened to me. So each culture is going to have a different definition of being a witch and what witchcraft is. And that doesn't mean that any of them are right or any of them are wrong. They're just different environments. Sort of like if you imagine, if, I live in North America in the Pacific Northwest. So the kinds of animal intelligence that I have available to me are going to be like bear and cougar and deer and maybe wolf if I'm in the right place, coyote. These are the wild animals that live out in my woods. If I live in Africa, in different parts of Africa, or in India, the things that I can connect with could be lions or tigers or monkeys, or, every part of the planet and every environment has a different set of life forms that go along with it. And so if you're in that environment, what we want to do, or what I would do if I was born somewhere else, is to tune into that specific biosphere and that energy spirit sphere and see how to connect with it. So the similarities between all the traditions that I see are that attention to life and the essence of life behind life, that is the thread that sort of pulls all the different cultural things together. It's like the specifics are just that. It's like your environment, where you are, what things you have around you, what kinds of seasons you have. There's places on the planet that don't have seasons. So if you live on the equator, it doesn't necessarily make sense for you to do rituals about, the shortest day, the longest day, the equal day, because you don't have that. So you have a different kind of practice that you would develop based upon where you live. So, it would be nice if there was just like, one book a person could recommend and say, hey, do this. But the thing to remember is it doesn't matter. It's a circle. Like, this is like a sphere of possibility. And if you're working with a circle or a sphere, there's no beginning, there's no end, there's just all these different perspectives and different places that you can start from. Because the idea is to go from the outside of that possibility and then go towards the center of that and then feel what creates the sphere around you and your place in the universe and your life and how it happens. So if you're not feeling well and you don't want to do a ritual because you're not up to it, no one's going to come along and like give you a bad mark and say, I'm sorry, but you're not a witch anymore because you failed to do this ritual at the right time and the right way. It isn't, it's not set up that way. Although I'm sure that you can meet different groups and different people who would say otherwise. That's the other thing. Everyone has their own opinion. So if someone is committed to a specific way of dealing with the world, that's what they're going to try and push, that's their specific way of dealing with the world. And it makes sense in the sense that it's what they're familiar with. Really teach about something you don't know anything about. You have to have some basis of familiarity in order to actually express that and hand that over to someone else so that they might see something in it that works for them or makes sense out of what you're talking about. So, like there's so many different kinds of personalities and stuff out there. So if you live like where I live, or near where I live at my, I think it's a longitude or a latitude. I never remember. I guess it's a latitude. The latitude goes around this way. If I'm wrong, you'll let me know. And the longitude is this way, right? So latitude on the planet where I am, the things that are around the Earth on that same level are going to have similar changes in the environment, and you know, like I get changes in the season here, not the same way I did when I lived up north, because up there we had very distinct changes in the season where we would have like, snow and really, really cold and really, really dark in the winter. And then in the summer it would get really, really bright and really, really hot. And so, you could tell you were in a different season. Here on this part of the United States, the seasons kind of sort of melt together, but we get the changes in light. So the light is stronger and stays out longer until the summer solstice. Then it starts to dim, which it's doing right now. The sun's not staying out so many hours until we get to Mabon in September, which is so close, not very far away. And so, doing rituals around the seasons or the changes in the seasons or the changes in cycles of any kind, like life cycles, gives you sort of a stepping stone for exploring and understanding different parts of it. And the way that is set up for me, each time of year there are different kinds of things I might want to do. Like in the winter time, it's more interpersonal work, looking at the self, looking deep within, working with the dark, not being afraid of the dark, but working with the dark. And in the summer it's the opposite. It's like everything is like out there and everybody's running around doing their thing. In the spring, the animals are out there, making babies and getting ready for summer, and the plants are growing like crazy and getting ready for harvest. All these things relate to our lives. So again, if you live in a different latitude, you're going to have different types of seasons or no seasons at all to interact with. And so you make your adjustments, because it's not one way. There is no one way of doing this. And that's one of the reasons why not everyone becomes a witch, is because the personal responsibility for yourself is sometimes overwhelming in different stages of your life. And you can decide it's not the right time for you, and that's okay. You can put it aside for 10, 15, 20 years and then pick it back up again. Like everyone has their own rhythm in their relationships, in their personal development, in their lives that they might have, and what works and what doesn't work, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. And having to deal with the real world is part of that. I remember when I was younger, I was always very annoyed because I remembered I remembered when I was part of a small town or community or a village or whatever, and my needs were met automatically. I mean, the townsfolk or the villagers, they gave me a place to sleep and they gave me food to eat. I didn't have to worry about those things. And in exchange, I was there for helping their babies come into the world, for stopping their, diseases from taking all their lives, and, working with them in that way. So there was an exchange. Nowadays, it's not like that. We have to figure out how to both make a living on our own and still have time for this kind of development. And I think that witches are important because the way we see the world and the universe, the unique perspective that we get, the energy behind and underneath and above the things that are in the world, gives us a different way of viewing the universe and interacting with it. And that's something that society needs. And we all need something in order to feel like we belong. Because we have those questions and confusions and stuff like that. So I've decided, okay, so this is like a video without an answer, in a sense, an overview. So what I'm going to do tomorrow on our live show is we're going to open it up to questions about how do I become a witch, or for beginners to ask questions about how to do this or that. And we'll see what what kinds of answers we can generate and what kind of questions, depending on the questions that we have. And I'm going to do it earlier in the day, like at 2 my time, so that means people in Europe will hopefully not have to go to sleep if you can make it or not. And I encourage the more experienced people to join in as well, because you might have some answers I don't, and that's okay. I don't have to know absolutely everything. So I guess that's about it for this particular video, and hopefully you found some of this not just helpful but encouraging. And this is Siofra Bradigan, and this has been Siofra's Magic Alcove. Blessed be.